Welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast, helping engineers, producers, and artists create professional recordings and mixes, even from home. I'm your host, Mike and Davina. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to the Master Mix podcast. I'm Mike and Davina, and thank you so much for being here today. Today, my guest is Caesar Edmunds. He is an award-winning mixer, engineer, and record producer based out of London. He's worked with artists such as Foals, Queens of the Stone Age, PJ Harvey, The Killers, St. Vincent, Beach House, Two Door Cinema Club, and so many other big bands. Caesar got his start originally working as an intern for the famed producers Flood and Alan Moulder. So in this podcast episode, we definitely get into a lot about that. And we also talk about Caesar's approach to working on music. And that's one of the things that I think I really found as I was talking with him is that he's gotten to the point where he can mix from the gut. So in this episode, we try to unpack that a little bit and what does gut mixing look like and how do you do it the right way? So with that said, let's get started with this interview. This is Caesar Edmunds. Caesar Edmunds, thank you so much for being on the Master Mix podcast. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How about you?
Doing fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for being on. For people who might not know your background and how you got started and how you got into this industry, can you give us a little bit about that, little of that story and let us know how you got to where you are now?
Basically, I went to Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts in Liverpool, Paul McCartney's School of Music, which is like his famed school. And I pretty much just went there. And one day, someone just asked me if I wanted to go to the studio. I went in the studio and I was a music student at that point. And once I stepped in the studio, that was it. Like, I just wanted to be in the studio. And like 2 years later, I think, when I was on the degree course, like I just had like someone gave me like Alan's email address, emailed him, say, hey, can I be, Alan Moulder. Hey, can I come over and do some work experience? And he was like, yeah, sure. Like, sure, we've got like a week or two for you. Sure, come down. That was about 9 years ago. Still haven't left. Haven't left the building complex. Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much my background.
That's a quick story. I like it, man. It's amazing because it's like, you know, I think that there are so many big names out there, and the thought for a lot of people, the thought of working for people like that just seems impossible, right? Like you would imagine that there's like a lineup of interns ready to go, and like you're one in a million, you're probably not going to get a shot. So like, what do you think it was that like got you in the door that quickly?
I've no idea. I guess it was just, I was just prepared to do everything. It's not like everything, but like, you know, when I stepped in, I was like, okay, I know what here I need to do teas, coffee for everyone. Make sure there's like tea for like, you know, you heard like the story of like Flood, like, you know, being in the studio and how he got his name, Flood, because he flooded everyone with a cup of tea, like, you know, and you just go like, okay, these are like the guys, like, you know, so you have to like go in prepared, and it's just like, okay, make sure like everyone is caffeinated all the time. And pretty much it got to a point where it's like 5 p.m. Alan Flood looked at me just like, no more coffee. We're good.
I love that, man. You just like, fueled them up with caffeine, and that's all it took.
Yeah, exactly. Or crack. Just
don't tell anyone what was in the drink.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a few years later, they'll be like, like, why do I feel weird when he's not around? I'm just kidding.
That's amazing. It's like that Dave Grohl video that he put out, like the Fresh Pots thing.
Oh yeah. Strangely enough, I think Alan was actually there because there was a Damn Crooked Vulture session.
No way.
Yeah. He was in there.
I love that, man. Well, let's go back a little bit further, because you said that you went to school for music. So you're a musician yourself. What instruments do you play?
I played the guitar when I was younger. Pretty much picked it up when I was like 10 or like 12. I can't remember. And yeah, it's pretty much like one of those, like, I want to play the electric guitar. And it was very funny. Like, my mom was just like, no, you need to learn the classical guitar. So they put me to like classical guitar lessons. My granddad used to like bring me to classical guitar school on every Sunday. I would skip it and go play Pokemon cards. never ever took it seriously until like I started going to electric guitar school, and I was just like, okay, great. But then again, it was just like you went there and you just didn't really learn anything. It was just really about like learning it yourself, really. The time spent, like you practice by yourself, and they just go in and just go like, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, like that sort of thing.
That's cool. So how do you think that your ability to play guitar has influenced the work that you do now?
Maybe that's why you hear like a lot of guitars in in my mixes, because I'm like, what are they playing? And I like turn them up.
Isn't that what they say? Like you can always tell what instrument the mixing engineer plays just by whatever's loudest in the mix, right?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, exactly. Just keep turning like the guitar. So I can't hear like those notes. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know if I guess like musicality just helps, like, you know, just like learning an instrument, knowing an instrument, it just helps like with producing music, and it's just like, you know, and all those kind of stuff. I remember I was in my first year as well, when I decided I want to do studio, work in like the studios, like just record, like be a record producer. And I I changed the instrument, like my basic instrument thing. And I changed it from guitar to vocals, and it was so uncomfortable. I had to like sing in front of a teacher. I was just like, I don't want to like learn this, but like I'm trying to learn it just to like see like, oh, this is how you warm up your vocals. Like this is like, so you get to like know all like the different like, you know, stuff when you sit down with vocalists, like, you know, just here's a few tips. That's what I thought, but I never really got into recording, did I?
But that's really interesting though. Like I do love that kind of that initiative of, you knew that you wanted to get into this, and so you're like, well, if I'm going to be dealing with musicians, how do I coach them through their performances? How do I get their best takes? So you actually learn that instrument, and vocals of all things too, right? Like most people just pick up like a drum kit or a guitar or whatever and, you know, try to learn that. But like vocals is such a kind of intimate instrument to learn and to coach people through, right? So I'm kind of fascinated to learn a little bit more about that and kind of what you learned throughout that process.
What I learned was just, you just have to share fear when you're singing. Like if I were to sing in front of someone, even public speaking for me is scary. So like when I like sit down with a singer or whatever, I just try to make them feel as comfortable as possible, which is sort of like a reflection of like my studio. It's just like, it feels like a lounge really, rather than like a commercial, like as in like a super pro, like there might be a better word for it, like a sterile environment. So like kind of go for like a, hey, come hang out. Like, you know, it's just like, you know, we're here to like, you know, not like have fun, but like, you know, we're here to make records, but like, you know, feel comfortable.
For sure. That's a really big part of it. And I mean, I could see it because we're on video right now, but people listening to this won't be able to see it. But, you know, it definitely looks like you're in a very cozy, comfy, small space. And yeah, I'm curious if you could tell me a little bit about your studio setup. Like, what kind of gear are you using these days, and what's that setup look like these days?
Currently, I've got like a stereo setup, and I've got a Dolby Atmos setup as well, which are the stereo setup. I've got like quite a lot of hardware inserts like running through, because I'm mainly in the box nowadays, because I still can't afford to buy an actual desk. Not yet. So like, I've got like hardware inserts for like my vocal stuff and like, you know, drums, whatever I kind of use really. And I'm using like Genelec 1 speakers for my stereos, and the PMC's 228, I believe. And like, I've got like the Dolby setup is just basically a digital setup with like Genelec speakers. That's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Do you find that you're starting to mix a lot more in surround these days?
No, it's a good bit of both. It's a lot of stuff that I mixed last year had to kind of be done in like Dolby Atmos, because of like the whole new Apple Music like announcement spatial audio, which is great. and it's just everyone's just taking a focus on like, oh, actually we're gonna get this thing set up, like, you know, we're gonna get these mixes done properly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just worked in my favor because like at the point, like I knew it was, I think the technology's been around since like what, 2012, I think. And like sort of, I got to a point where one of my friends was just telling me about this all the time. And I was reading up about it at like during lockdown, and I just got bored and I started reading. It's like, oh, I wonder what's the next new phase? Not like new phase, but like, you know, what's out there. And it just read into this, and then I just went like, oh, okay. It seems like it's getting everywhere. Maybe I should look into it just in case, like, you know, cause we're all control freaks, and like, you know, so like me, like, you know, I'm a particular control freak, so I like kind of like my stereo mixes. I kind of don't want someone else to be screwing around with like the Atmos mixes. So like I kind of thought like, oh well, if I can do both, win.
Well,
but
I
it's
think
purely because because of the control freak problem.
For sure, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if you're working on your mixes, why send it off to someone else to finish the rest of the Atmos mix? Let's talk about Atmos for a second, because I think it's still a relatively new thing, and it's starting to become kind of thrown around a lot more. I think people are starting to learn a lot more about it. And there's probably people that are listening to this that have never even heard of what we're talking about here. Can you give us a little bit of a description of what is the Dolby Atmos platform, and, you know, why is this a thing that people should be listening out for?
It's an immersive like format that is readily available for a lot of systems that are not just for like an actual home cinema system, that you can actually have like on your phones, on like TV soundbars, and like, you know, your Amazon Echo Studio, like, you know, speakers. They're all like Dolby Atmos now. Your iPhones, your earbuds, like, you know, more or less like the new consumer products are all made with Dolby Atmos in mind. So that's like a thing where you can have like your mixes like just be out there with Atmos, if that makes any sense at all.
And it's basically like surround sound, but it's available in a stereo format or in a much bigger format with like 7.4.1 kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's scalable, like, format basically. And it uses very smart technology that I would not be able to like explain to you like, without screwing it up. Someone's going to be like, no, this dude, like, he said it completely wrong. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But like, I'm sure there's someone that's out there that's really technical that can explain it better than this. But that's all I kind of understand. And like, you know, that's why I got into it, because you can have it like, you know, in like, it's scalable, and like, it sounds good. It sounds good.
So walk me through that process. So it kind of sounds like because it can be turned into like a big scalable surround system. I'm assuming that you're starting your mixes. Are you starting your mixes more as stereo and then going to like the surrounds, or are you kind of working from the bigger picture and shrinking down?
No, I usually start mixes from stereo, because you usually get like the stereo approved, because at the moment now, I'm saying this is in 2021, this is July 2021, and there's no Atmos mastering engineer at the moment. So you're kind of doing like the mastering at the same point of time. So you're matching like the EQs and like the stuff that like the mastering engineer like does to your mix. And from there, then you just move it into immersive sort of like format, basically. So you move from a stereo to a 3D space, basically. And it's one of those, it's like, it makes sense to me, because like, you know, like I mix those tracks, and like being a mixer, it just, you just know like, oh, this feels right. Like, you know, cause like I've spent like, you know, the last 9 years of my life just like, you know, just doing this day in and day out, like mixing. So it just comes like quite naturally that you're just like, okay, this works or this doesn't. And like, I think like, without like, you know, saying anything or like anyone, but like, it makes sense for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you as the mixer, you have the vision for the song. So, why not expand that vision and make it into more of a surround setting?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's great when you like see like, people like, there was one like mix that I did, for, this one mix I did for the Latham's, like, I can't remember what's the name of it. It's, How Beautiful Life Can Be. And Spike had mixed like the single mix, and like I've done like most of the album, but like I sort of like I understood like what he's going for, and just like you just understand like, because like for the love of the game, as much as you say, it's just like how people mix differently and stuff like that, and so you just try to not go crazy on their vision and just go with it.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a new technology that people should be paying attention to as it becomes more and more prevalent and people start to utilize it a lot more. And anyone who's listening to this, there was a little hint that I think you dropped in there, which is like the super niche to get into, which is being the mastering engineer for Atmos. If you figure that out, it sounds like there's a good market there to jump into.
Yeah. But like, if you, I have no idea how would you do that though. Because you've got like 128 like objects. If you have like 128 EQs and compressors, like analog, like it'd be fucking like crazy.
It's certainly not going to be a very analog friendly format.
No, definitely not.
You're going to have to like start mastering on consoles just because then you have like all the channel strips, right? Yeah, exactly. But you still can't probably do it because it needs like all those like metadata on like different tracks, like where they placed and everything. It's actually a very frighteningly smart technology. Yeah, I've only recently begun to look into it, and a lot of it just goes over my head, but I know that it's becoming
literally because there's like speakers on top of your
no
head.
pun intended. Yeah, but no, that actually works out. That's awesome, man. I love that you're like really on like the cutting edge of it and just trying to jump in while like it's still new and doing it.
Yeah. No, yeah.
That's all.
I think you kind of have to, because it's not like it's sort of like, new things are like, new toys are great. You kind of have to keep trying. If not, like, what's the fun of it, really? We're here to, like, kind of, not like, it's like, we're here to enjoy ourselves in life, like, not.
I think that's why so many people become, like, gear junkies, is because, like, it's fun to have toys to play with. So when a new way of mixing comes out, and it involves a lot of toys, because you got to get all the speakers and all that stuff. Like, it's a pretty fun way to get into it if you're a gear junkie. Like,
definitely. I've got like a speaker problem. Like with all these, like I've now got like a 7.1.4 setup, and with my stereo speakers and everything, I probably have like about 22 speakers or 24 speakers.
Wow.
I can't remember the exact amount, but I might have a problem.
So you know what?
And the problem is more speakers. I need more. No, just kidding.
But that actually brings up a really interesting point. And I think that one of the issues that I know a lot of people have when it comes to their mixes is this concept of translation and getting mixes to translate across different sets of speakers. And I know that like sometimes it's hard enough just like when you're working on one pair of monitors to get a mix to translate. But then when you have like, in your case, like 20 something speakers, you have now so many more options to mix on. And I imagine that it somewhat gets confusing after a while to figure out like what that translation is actually, like what that actually means, So when you're mixing, how do you go about making sure that your mixes will translate across different sets of speakers? Or like, what's the best way for people to go about that? If like, should they be listening on multiple monitors? Like what's that process look like for you?
I would say so. They should like try to like just check it on as much systems as they can, really, because like, you just check it on like your iPhone, your earbuds, your speakers, your like, this car stereo test has been around for like, everyone kind of does it, I guess. that sort of thing. But I think like it reveals something that you like can't. It's also, it could be like a mental thing where you're just like, you're so focused in something and you just focused on something that's so much that you can't hear anything else. And then once you take yourself away from that space, and then you're just like, oh, actually, what was I thinking?
Gotcha. But with so many speakers sounding so different, how do you learn to trust what's actually happening inside of your mix?
I'll say that like there are speakers that like pair together well, and like speakers that don't pair with each other well. Like, you know, like I don't know what like doesn't pair really well, but like before the Genelec ones, I had like ATCs, SMC or SCM 20s, the old kind, the Mark IIs, and with my PMCs, and I really, really love them. They're good combo. They just work together. The ones and the PMCs, they work well together as well. I like, you know, every time like I switch like those speakers, like they sort of like, they do somehow complement each other. There's not like, I don't know, like it's very hard to say like what speakers that I like, yeah, that like you put up and it's just like whenever you change, you're like, whoa, what the hell? Yeah. If that happens, then you're probably like, probably just like don't get those two together.
So it sounds like you're kind of just looking for speakers that kind of fill in the gaps of each other. Like if one's missing some low end, you're going to go to something that has a little bit more low end and compare it that way.
Yeah. A little bit more, not like insanely, like it's just like, whoa, what am I listening to? Like sort of like that kind of, I think that will throw you off like more than not.
For sure. I think that's a really interesting point too, because I think a lot of people do go for some like kind of polarizing sets of speakers, or, you know, they might have like, let's say NS10s, for example, and then they're like, well, they don't have much low end, so I'm just going to get a subwoofer. But subwoofers can be like way too much. So you kind of need something that's like kind of that in between sometimes.
In between.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about your mixing approach and a little bit more about your process there. When it comes to starting a mix, what is your mindset going into that? And like, where do you start? How do you start? Do you normally have a similar process that you follow every time? What's that look like?
Yeah. My process is just listening to the rough mix and just trying to see like what's good about it. What's like, you know, what do I need? What can I try to fix? And like, you know, or not try to fix, but like, you know, what can I improve on? And like, what can I go? How can I bring like, you know, things to the table that like, you know, necessarily is a bit different from like what is there? And like, you know, just usually like that's how I would approach it. Just listen to the rough mix and just go like, okay, I think this. So like first listen is kind of like very important to me. It's just like, you know, it's just like where you naturally like, you know, just think about it. Don't stop yourself. You just think like, okay, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to do that. And like, you know, it's just instinctual, I guess.
So you're kind of coming up with a bit of a game plan based on like your first listen of that rough mix.
Yeah, pretty much. And then pretty much then with like the next like 6 hours, I'll be battling it. It's like, it's like, why won't you fit? Why won't you fit? It's like Jenga. It's literally like Jenga.
Yeah. Well, especially too, when you're listening to the rough mixes, there's often a lot of good stuff in rough mixes. And when you hear that, I mean, you want to do your best to like recreate that energy. And sometimes it's like, it's kind of dismantling what's already been done and like kind of reverse engineering it, right?
Yeah, completely. And some people have like, I guess like not some people. I mean, they stop at where they are at for a reason. Sort of, they're in the room together. The producer, and the artist, like, and the recording engineer, they're all there, they're all present, and they stop there for a particular reason, and you just have to like try to like understand that and like, you know, try to like see like, okay, great, like that's a snapshot. Let's try to move it forward from there. That's
a really good point, because it's like people aren't just half-assing a rough mix. Like they're putting it together to the best of their abilities, and then they're stopping when they think, okay, this is actually sounding pretty good. So then they're coming to you saying, make it sound better, but preserve a lot of what we've kept here, kind of, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they just want everything off the menu. No, just kidding. So, yeah. Yeah, yeah, which is a tough thing to do, I guess. Which you just try to like preserve like the energy and like give it a bit of like you as well, which is kind of sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. Like depends on the content, really. Sometimes it's just like I guess like sometimes like tracks like when it comes to you and it's just like it's so natural that you just go like I know exactly what to do, ba 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 ba, and it's just like yay. Or like sometimes you could be like you could be nailing your head against the wall. It's just like, I don't get it. There's days like that. There's days like, it's great. 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, but like, yeah.
I love that though. I mean, it's good to hear that, right? Because I think a lot of people just assume that, when you get to like your level that mixes are just easy. That just happens, right? And like there are,
don't tell everyone.
there are certainly those days where it's a challenge, and I think that that's actually one of the things that keep a lot of us actually active as mixers in this industry. Like one of the things that we love about it is that like it is that kind of puzzle, and it's kind of dismantling certain things and trying to figure out how do they do that? Like how do I create that? And going through that exercise actually will make you a better mixer in the end, because once you've cracked that code, it's like that's a new tool in your toolbox, and like you can always go back to it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So another question that I always love to ask people is, in your opinion, what makes a great mix?
A great mix is a great mix is a mix that you don't listen to it technically, you listen to it with a great mix is when you listen to it and you think like, whoa, like that's a great song. You don't think about the mix.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I think, at least. You just, you turn your head and it's just like, wow, that's a great song. You don't turn around, that was a great mix. Oh yeah. It's like, does it matter if it's it could be like the worst mix, but it's the vibe good, like, it's like the feeling good and like stuff like that, which is like what I think, like, the song is important, like, so like, yeah, I always say like, I think like it got drilled in my head by Mulder and Flood that said the song is king, like, that sort of thing. And just you have to do justice to like to the song, like that sort of thing. And it's just like when I was younger, probably like, try to be showy, try to like, yeah, I could do like this. But then you just, and then he'll turn around and just like, nope. And then he's just like, why? But it's technically better. And then you sit back and just like, oh, I know. So what if it's better? It doesn't fit the song. Like, that sort of thing. Kind of, in that kind of.
No, I definitely agree with that. It's kind of like the, a very common thing with live sound is that like, when you do the job right, nobody acknowledges the sound man, but when you mess it up, everyone is like, this was the worst. The sound guy, like butchered it. But when it's great, it's like, oh, the band is just amazing. Like no one thinks about the sound guy,
Yeah. No, completely. And that's great. Like, that's like, I want to be in the background for a reason. I'm not a superstar.
Well, and also too, it's like the artist is the artist. Like they're the feature here. It's not like, you shouldn't be listening to like the Beatles and thinking like George Martin's amazing. Like, screw the Beatles. Like, it's like it would just take you out of that element and kind of ruin that band for you if like you're focused way more on the mixer than the band, right? So
yeah, exactly. I guess like you do get fixated on it as you grow older, and like when you're into the production side of things, you're like, oh my god, like it's like that what like George Martin did, like blah 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 blah. You can like talk about that like all the time, but like as like a listener, you shouldn't. As like an average listener, you shouldn't be like, oh, George Martin's some fucking amazing.
Screw Ringo and Paul and all those guys.
Yeah, exactly. George is fucking amazing. but the band's amazing as well. Yeah. They're all amazing.
Well, it's to your point, right? It's like they made the song sound great. It wasn't highlighting the engineer. As for your process when you start your mix, like you talked about listening to the rough mix, Do you typically work in a specific order with your tracks?
Yes, I do. Very boringly. I think it's probably like some people say it's wrong. Some people say like, oh yeah, that's cool. But like, I usually start with like the boring, like same old drums, then bass, then guitars and keys, like music stuff, and then vocals, like, sort of like gradually. And I sort of like try to like, I try to like make it into like oh god, it sounds terrible, but like, I try to make it sound like a karaoke. Like you want to sing along. You just like feel like, yeah. Like, like not all songs are like that, but like, you feel like you're within the song, and then you put the vocals in, get it sound like great. And you're just like, yeah, I'm in the mix. Like I'm in the song, like,
Yeah, so you're kind of shaping it sounds like your process is kind of shaping the rhythm section first, getting that low end, getting that energy, then adding all the other sprinkly stuff on top, and then the piece of resistance is like the vocals, and just making that like sit on top of it all and have its, it fitting that in the context of the mix.
Yeah, exactly. I know some people who like do like, they do like vocals and drums, like the vocals never ever muted, like the vocals is always in, but I'm just not that kind of guy. That's why I guess maybe I work on some kind of music and not other kinds, I guess. I don't. It's all about taste, I guess. Like, when you get to this point of like mixing, is just like, you are literally paid for your taste, I guess. It's just like, you're from that school, or like you're from the other school, which is like, like, I don't know, like pop mixing and alt mixing, or like something like that, which if you took a gun and pointed at me, like someone would say like, oh, what's your style of mixing? I was like, I don't know. Like, someone could point it out to me. Like, I have no idea.
Well, you're right. There's like different needs in different genres, and in the pop world, like, yeah, the vocal's king in all songs, really. But like when it's a solo artist, like if you have like an Ariana Grande or something like that, like her voice has to be like the loudest thing, and it has to be the most pristine, clear quality thing in the whole mix.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I really admire about a lot of the mixes that you make is when I listen to your songs, I feel like I immediately just get sucked into the environment. Like I'm listening to the band in like the room, like I'm here in a concert hall listening to them, or I'm in like a small room. Like, you do such a great job with the way you apply reverb in your mixes, and it doesn't sound fake. It doesn't sound like overly saturated and like ginormous. Like, I find that you do it in a really tasteful way that just really places me in the environment with the band. And I was wondering, like, what's your approach to using reverb in a mix? Like, how do you go about deciding what kind of reverb types you're going to use, or the reverb times, and how do you go about applying it in a way that adds all of that width and that depth, but without sounding muddy?
First of all, thank you. You know what? I'm going to tell you a secret. I don't think about any of it. It's not like I don't think about any of it, but like, it's sort of like, oh, this needs a reverb, and I'm just like, and then just like tweak it, and just like, oh, it sounds great. Yeah. It's like, so it's kind of, it's a non-thinking thing, where it got to a point where, which is kind of important, I guess, to a certain extent, where I went to school. I went to a great school, a great university that taught me to be super technical. And then I got that beaten out of me by Mulder and Flood, where they like, stop thinking about the technical, listen to it, how it feels. And then gradually, when you've done it like so many times, I don't use like the same reverbs like all the time, by the way, just so you know. It's not like, oh, reverb preset, here we go. Yeah, but like, it's just sort of like just comes, and like, you just use it, and you just like, oh, this sounds great. So like, maybe there's like 10 types of reverb that I use, like, all the time. But like, it's sort of like, I never think about like, like, oh, this needs to be longer, this needs to be shorter. I guess it depends on the track, or it's like, it's just, I don't really go and like actively think about like, oh, this needs like this kind of like, reverb. It's just, I guess that's like the thing about having like good training is just like it comes out of you naturally. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, but I still feel like you're making decisions in the moment, right? Like, especially if you're saying you have 10 different reverbs, there's got to be some sort of decision process of like, I'm going to go to this one first, or I'm going to like, how like in terms of auditioning the sounds to find the right ones.
Possible. Yeah. That is very possible. But yeah. It's like very like, it's not that like, it's just like, I've got this like, auto reverb machine, like one of the, like, that like, I just like turn knobs, like not like I know like what settings they are, but like, sort of like you just change it and it's just like, oh, okay, oh, this sounds great. And then you're just like, oh, this is a thing. And it's just like, yeah, great.
So you're basically, your process is going through like the presets on your reverb units and kind of just starting from there. And it's like whatever catches your attention right away is what you stick with.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gotcha.
It's not what that, takes my attention, is what doesn't take my attention probably.
Fair, yeah, that's a good point.
Whoa, this is like too much reverb, because that's when like there's a lot of reverb.
No, that's actually a really good point, because I think that a lot of people, when they think of adding effects, they're thinking of it as an effect, and like it's got to be this thing that jumps out, and you're saying like, no, it shouldn't. It should just be. It should feel natural in the context of it.
Yeah. Should just help it out, I guess.
Yeah. That's cool. What kind of reverbs are you using in your mixes?
I think like Valhalla, a lot of them. IK Multimedia, the Arturia stuff, the Wave stuff as well. Reverb, classic. It's just fucking like, it's one of those, it's sometimes like you said, Reverb, like auto verb. Fucking, I have no idea. I need to check my plugin list, but like, I'm recording at the moment, so I can't check that. The memory is short when it comes to reverb, or to like any plugin. To be honest, I'm just like, oh, what stuff do I have?
But that's cool too, right? I mean, like it goes to show that you don't necessarily. I mean, it sounds like you're using stock plugins, you're using like premium plugins. It's kind of like whatever gets the job done is your approach.
Yeah, completely. Whatever that gets the job done. There's no such thing as like, there's no such thing of like, like, ooh, reverb, ooh, but like, sometimes reverb's great. Works.
And are you ever messing around with like are you messing with the settings on your reverb times, or are you just like literally just using like presets?
Oh, no. I do. I hardly use presets. Like maybe I'll start with presets, be like, oh, okay, like let's use like, oh, this whole, and then like start with that, and then like just like tune like the reverb time, the pre-delay, and like, just like the EQ of it, like, sort of like, just sort of, just everything really. And then you just go like, that was not the preset at all.
So, I mean, it really sounds like you're a gut instinct type of mixer.
I try to. I think maybe, now thinking about it, it sounds like it.
Yeah. But that's a really interesting way of approaching it too. I think that like there's kind of this like weird cycle in like an engineer's career where when you first start, you're just clueless as to what to do, and everything just sounds muddy and whatnot. And then you kind of like learn the technical way of doing things. And for a lot of the engineers, like that technical side, that's where they get stuck. They're just like, I'm always going to be all technical all the time. And then they kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. But it sounds like at your level, it's like you kind of started trying to mix from the gut. You weren't getting the results. You learned the technical side. And now you're going back a little bit to like mixing from the gut, just feeling what's right, because you instinctively know where to adjust your controls to get that sound that you want, because now you've learned that technical side. But you're mixing from gut, not numbers on like your, I got to put this knob up to 5 or whatever,
Yeah. You are completely right. I'm not just mixing by numbers. But that's like, that's a good point. You're completely right. And that's like the best place to be, I guess.
For sure. Well, I mean, you want to, to go back to your point of like what you learned from Flood and Alan, it's just like you're serving the song the whole time, right? And yeah, that's cool. What's speaking of those guys, and like especially because a lot of your experience in like in working in studios was like working for these guys, like you were getting like the training of a lifetime working with them, right?
Yeah, so, definitely.
What would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a result of working for those guys?
Tough to say, really. I guess I don't know. It's very, very difficult question. Like, I'd say just be yourself and like, just be yourself and just like trying your best at everything. Yeah, that's like kind of, it's so simple, but like, it's like kind of, it's completely true at the same time.
Well, I like that. That's a good answer, especially because I think a lot of times when it comes to internships, we're kind of told you're just supposed to shut up, say nothing, like you're kind of like invisible in the studio. But it sounds like they embraced who you were and like allowed you to be yourself in the studio.
Yeah, completely. You are completely right. I think like at the start, like probably like the first month or two, like, I was like quiet, and then like they see like, oh, this guy like does like the things like, that we asked him to, like yada yada yada, and then just slowly like try to find out about this guy. Cause like, I mean like, no offense, but like when you're a runner, it's just like sometimes you just do like 2 weeks and that's it. Like, so like, not trying to be mean to anyone, but like, it's like, it'll be insane to like learn everyone's life story, and it'll be like, whoa.
But that's an interesting point too.
Do you have?
Like, I think that the idea of like the 2-week intern or whatever, that is a very common thing. And I don't think that it's because like there's only 2 weeks for you to show up. Like in your case, you're like, I'm not leaving. Like, like you put your foot down and you just stayed, right? But that wouldn't have happened if they didn't like you. So there was obviously like something in the way something in how you worked that made them see like, okay, this guy is going to do the job for us and is going to like be who we need in the studio.
Yep. Yeah, you're completely right. And I've got no idea. One day we'll find out. It's like, yeah, I need to probably ask them. It's just like, why did you just like, was it to promote diversity? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, you definitely had a great opportunity there, and clearly, like, I mean, you absorbed a lot of that great information, and turned it into like an amazing skill set that you now implement into your own work. When it comes to your mixes, how long does it usually take you to finish a mix?
It will take me about somewhat about 10 hours to get like the first like draft over, probably sometimes even longer. I would say like there's like a estimate amount 10, because 12 seems like it's very excessive, but sometimes it could be 12 or even 2 days. Like, I don't even know. And probably about like when it comes to like tweaks and everything, like about like 2 days in total, probably.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah, it's like more or less.
And are you starting all your mixes from scratch, or do you typically use templates, or what does that process look like?
Usually I start off by, which is the great thing about like nowadays, is just like, it used to be when I started out with Alan, all the pre-mixing was done on the board. So when you open up your Pro Tools session, it's just like, oh my god, there's nothing on it. And then you have to like try to like match like the levels and like the EQs, like that's usually done by like, that Alan will get it on the board and then mix it. But like nowadays, like where production comes to this point where you mix along as you go. So by the time you get the session over to me, it's usually like, littered with plugins, not like littered, like, there's plugins on top. There's like, balances that like the band's like happy with and like stuff like that. And you just take it from there. So you're not starting from complete scratch.
Gotcha. How do you know when you're done your mixes?
Where I start second guessing everything. And before I, it's not when I'm done. I usually send the first draft off when I'm like, is this? And then you constantly like, oh, is this better? Is this? And then you just go like, fuck it. I'll just fucking just send it off. Oh Christ, sorry. I'll just send it over and see how I fare. Like, if it's bad, if like, they'll tell me rather than like spending like 2 days or 3 days and then just come back and say like, Caesar, you know what? And then you'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have spent 3 days on it. I should have gone with my gut and just gone like, send it over and see what they say.
I love that. I think it's interesting that you said it as like when you start second guessing, because I think that that's such a important point in your mixing process, because for a lot of people that are new, they're just kind of second guessing everything to begin with. And so you can't just stop at the beginning, but there becomes a point where once you get into that rhythm of mixing and you kind of like feel like it's starting to sound like a song, once you're in that point there where it's like, this sounds like a song, everything's kind of fitting well in the mix, that's kind of like the spot to stop. Because, to your point, that's where you start second guessing, and then you can really undo a lot of your work.
Yeah. You can undo a lot of your work and then just to redo it again, or just like, and it's just a strange thing where you see like people like, we're all human beings. So like, you second guessing is very, very common. It's not very common. It is human nature, I guess, to second guess yourself. And you just know when to like slap your hand and just say, stop. Either take a break from it or just send it off. And trust yourself, like, sort of like trust the process, like trust yourself. It's like a new thing that like I kind of recently got into, is just like, just trust the process. Like, just believe in yourself. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be.
Mm-hmm. And this is also something that I find comes up quite a bit on the podcast too, is that like when you make that call and you stop in the middle of your mix, or you stop whenever you're starting to second guess yourself, that's kind of an important point anyway, because you could spend hours and hours working on a song, but then when you send it off to the band, like they might hate everything you spent all that time on. So you kind of have to just like get it sounding like a song first and then work from there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely. You're right. It's just like you could feel like you could send something and then it just be so far off from what they want. And it'd just be like, you could spend like another 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and then you just realize like, oh, you know what? Actually, bad move, dude.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, just throughout this whole conversation, what I'm really picking up of this is that like your way of working is just so much from mixing from the gut and not questioning things, because that questioning period is where things start to go crazy and you start to undo a lot of your good work.
And sometimes like it could be wrong as well. Like sometimes I do find that like when I trust myself a bit too much is when I get too cocky, and then I just go like, oh, Caesar, you should have fucking checked it.
Yeah, there's definitely a fine line, right? Like you don't want to try pushing the boundaries too hard.
No, for sure. I'm not like I don't go out and I'm not like a super confident guy, but like, it's just like, I just try to like learn and like, just like, just move on. Just like, there's nothing like, there's nothing, you just need to keep walking and just like, just move and just trust that like things will be there for you. For sure.
Love it, man. Well, Caesar, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you got a busy day ahead of you, and you got some travel plans that you got to take care of. But thanks for being on here. If people want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I guess go on to my gram, man. That was a terrible way of saying that. I think best thing is just like my Instagram. It's Caesar Edmunds. Yeah. Going there, or like my website, but like, it's kind of websites like there, like sort of thing. Like everyone has a website, but it's not as like, just contact me on like on Instagram. I need to stop swearing.
It's all good, man.
Just contact me on like Instagram or like, stuff like that. Like it's just more personal that way rather than like, just being on like the website.
Perfect. Awesome. And lastly, are there any cool projects that you're working on right now that you can talk about?
I think there's like the most recent thing that just came out was I just did like a Dolby Atmos track for Inhaler, this Irish band. I just did like the whole album, and it's just very exciting for me, like this whole Dolby Atmos thing. But like, I love, like, my stereo is like bread and butter. Atmos is just like, just the cherry on top of the cake. But yeah, that's like the most recent thing. And like, yeah, that was very fun to work on. It's just like, yeah, you should definitely check it out if you can.
Definitely.
Like, as in like spatial audio.
Cool. Yeah. I'll definitely check that out. I mean, I'm definitely interested in learning a lot more about the spatial audio thing, because it's becoming more popular, and from the couple examples that I've heard, it's been very impressive. So, I'm definitely looking forward to checking out your mixes, because, hey, like I said earlier on, like, your mixes in stereo to me have always felt like they have so much like cool atmosphere to them. So I just know that taking that and putting it into a surround setting is just going to make it that much cooler. So yeah, man, I'm really excited to check that out. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Pleasure,
man.
So that was my interview with Caesar Edmunds, and that was a lot of fun. Caesar is a really funny guy, and we were just having a great laugh the whole time. I love just his approach to how he mixes. He really doesn't overthink it, and I think that is something that for so many home studio engineers, we tend to get in our heads too much. We tend to overthink our process. And I mean, as we talked about in the interview, you have to definitely learn the technical side, and you have to become proficient with the tools, and you have to understand how to use them. But when you get to that level of knowing how to use the equipment, you can't start to approach your mixes from being too technical. You have to mix for the song. You can't be mixing by numbers or, thinking you have to do things a certain way. You always have to be thinking of the bigger picture and serving the song. And that is definitely the way Caesar works. And if you listen to his mixes, you could tell that gut mixing definitely goes far. When you have the skills to know what to do and you just mix from the gut and you serve your song, make it sound as good as possible, you can get great results. And Caesar's work is definitely proof of that. So if you haven't heard any of his work before, I highly recommend that you check out his portfolio, because there's just some great songs in there and his mixes sound incredible. So I hope that you enjoyed that episode, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast so that you can get notified about all of the new episodes as they are released. Every Wednesday, we're going to be releasing new episodes, so by subscribing, you'll get that notification, and you'll be one of the first to actually listen to the episodes. So definitely make sure to do that, and also make sure to visit MasterYourMix.com. That's where I help out musicians with creating pro-sounding recordings from their home studios, and being able to do it without needing tons of expensive gear or fancy acoustic treatment. So visit MasterYourMix.com, and while you're there, we've got tons of great resources to help you out, and one of which that I want to draw your attention to is called The Mixing Mindset. This is a book that I put out a couple years ago. It became an Amazon #1 bestseller, and it's all about giving you the step-by-step formula for creating pro mixes from your home studio. And inside, I walk you through my entire process from beginning to end of how to analyze your tracks and know exactly what to do with things like EQ, compression, automation, effects, and so much more, so that from beginning to end, you have a very clear idea of what to do with your tracks so that you can get your mixes done and be proud of the results. So once again, check that out. It's called The Mixing Mindset, and that's available at MasterYourMix.com. That's it for this episode, guys. I hope you really enjoyed that, and I can't wait to talk to you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. To have your questions answered, submit your questions to questions@MasterYourMix.com. Please go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And for more information on how you can improve your mixes, visit MasterYourMix.com.